Hello, I'm Ollie and this is CriminOlly, where I talk about crime, pulp, horror, that kind of thing. Today, a great week of reading mysteries. It's my weekly wrap-up. So this is, you may remember, the second week of March Mystery Madness, the annual reading event dedicated to reading mysteries. And I'm very happy once again to be a co-host of that event. So if you want more information about it, I'll try and remember to leave a link to my announcement video for it, which will give you more details. But basically, it's a month where we read mysteries. And I've had a great week this week. So you might remember that the theme of March Mystery Madness this year, because it's the 10th one, is decades. There were various ways you could explore that theme, and I'm choosing to do it by reading a book from each of the last 10 decades, working through them in order. So this week I'm going to talk about a book from the 60s, a book from the 70s, a book from the 80s, and a bit of a book from the 90s. So I finished the books from the 60s, 70s and 80s. I'm still reading the book from the 90s, and actually I'm reading another mystery from the 80s as well. So I've got 5 books to talk to you about this week, 3 of which I've finished, 2 of which are ongoing. So let me crack on and talk about them then. So the first book I finished this week was the one I think I was reading when I made this video last week, which is Bright Orange for the Shroud by John D. MacDonald. So this is one of the Travis McGee mysteries. And maybe they're not mysteries, maybe they're more thrillers than mysteries. So this one involves Travis McGee, who is a guy who's like a kind of salvage investigator who spends half his life bumming around on his houseboat, and the other half of his life like solving mysteries, doing cases for people to earn enough money so he can spend the other half bumming around. So he's a really engaging and interesting hero. So in this one, he's investigating something that's happened to a guy who's not exactly a friend of his, but someone in his circle of acquaintances who's basically been scammed and whose life has fallen apart a bit. So it's about him investigating that, trying to get to the bottom of that and put things right. So just a really enjoyable, solid thriller. Definitely has a 60s feel to it. The kind of treatment of like male-female relationships and things like that is definitely very 60s in these Travis McGee books. There are lots of kind of girls lounging around in bikinis on Travis McGee's houseboat, that kind of thing. But still an enjoyable, solid thriller. I always have a good time with these Travis McGee books. Moving on then to the 1970s. So I read one of the Spencer mysteries by Robert B. Parker. This is, I think, the 3rd in the Spencer series, Mortal Stakes. So this was really good. I really like Spencer as a PI. The books have a really nice amount of humour in them, but they have really solid mysteries as well. So Spencer is this Boston PI. He's kind of quite tough and two-fisted, but also really enjoys cooking. So you get nice scenes of him preparing meals as he kind of contemplates the clues of the case and things like that. So in this one, he gets hired by a baseball team, or someone associated with the baseball team anyway, because they think one of their star players is like throwing games. They think he's involved in some sort of gambling syndicate. So it's about Spencer investigating that and getting to the bottom of it. And it was just, again, a really solid, enjoyable mystery. And as I say, Spencer is such an interesting and enjoyable character to read. He's got that kind of great hard-boiled, humorous style of dialogue. There's some very, very funny scenes where he's like basically trying to flirt with women. Just a very engaging and enjoyable mystery. I had a great time with this. Moving on to the 80s then. So I read one of the one of Lawrence Block's Matt Scudder mysteries, and I think I can't remember which one it is. I think it's book 7 in the series, and this was my favourite of the 3 books I finished this week. So it's called Out on the Cutting Edge, and it was just great. So a New York set mystery, again a PI style novel like Mortal Stakes. So Matt Scudder is a great character. So he is in some ways a kind of stereotypical PI character. So he's an ex-cop, he's kind of he's an alcoholic, his marriage has fallen apart because of his alcoholism. But what's really great about these books is you get like the ongoing story of Scudder's life and his battle against his alcohol addiction. So it's not just it's not just part of the kind of backdrop of the books. It's really central to the books. So by this point in the series, he's not drinking anymore. He's going to AA meetings regularly, and indeed there are two mysteries in this book. One of which is the one he gets hired to solve, which is about a young woman who's gone missing. And then the other one is related to him going to Alcoholics Anonymous. So a guy he meets at Alcoholics Anonymous goes missing as well. So you've got two really interesting mysteries, really well done and nicely woven together. And Lawrence Block does some really great stuff with kind of tricky, almost like sleight of hand, like making you look in one direction when actually you should be looking in the other direction. And when you realise what's going on and put the pieces together, everything's been laid out for you. He's just slightly tricked you as you've gone through the book. He's really, really great at this kind of thing. And Matt Scudder is probably my favourite PI. I think he's a really interesting, rich character. So yeah, thoroughly enjoyed this one. And it's made me, by reading both the Parker book, the Robert B. Parker book and the Lawrence Block book, have made me want to immediately continue reading those series. I hadn't read either of them for a while. I think I read a Parker book, either earlier this year or last year. I read the second one. But Scudder I hadn't read for a few years, but it's really made me want to continue reading both of those series. So in terms of ongoing things then, so let me tell you about the 80s one first. So this is the pick for the My Novel Life challenge that I'm doing. So that's where I read a book from every year I've been alive, starting with the year of my birth, 1973. So we're now into the 80s. So my pick for 1981 was Gorky Park by Martin Cruz Smith. So I had a copy of this, definitely had a second-hand paperback copy of it when I was a teenager, but never got around to reading it. I'm really enjoying this. So I'm listening to the audiobook. So if you don't know, it's set in the Soviet Union, so set in Moscow, about an investigator, a cop in Moscow, investigating the discovery of 3 corpses in Gorky Park. And it's fascinating, just the detail about life in the Soviet Union. Now, what I don't know is how accurate that detail is and how much of it is, has a kind of American slant on it, I guess, given that this was written, when the Soviet Union was still a thing. So I'm sure Martin Cruz Smith visited Russia to investigate it or, research a bit. But there was definitely a kind of politicised perception, I suppose, in the West of exactly what life was like in the Soviet Union, and this book plays into that. So you kind of lots of bureaucracy and suspicion and paranoia and things like that. Now, how true that actually is, I'm not sure, but it makes for a great read. Really, a really interesting book. The mystery is excellent as well, as it's quite detailed and complex. But as Renko, the cop, gradually investigates things and puts the pieces together. So I'm really enjoying this. I'm really looking forward again to reading more in the series, because there are, I think over a dozen books in this series, or at least a dozen books in this series, which span from 1981, when this book was written, pretty much up till, fairly recently. I think I can't remember when the most recent one came out, but, goes through the whole kind of glasnost perestroika period of Russian politics and Soviet politics, the fragmentation of the Soviet Union. So I'm really interested to see how Martin Cruz Smith handled all of that. Anyway, this book is really good. I'm thoroughly enjoying it, and I wish I'd got around to reading it 30 years ago when I previously had a copy of it. Then the other thing that I'm reading is my 90s pick for the March Mystery Madness event, which is The Beekeeper's Apprentice by Laurie. So this is a Sherlock Holmes pastiche, so featuring Sherlock Holmes and the narrator, who's a young woman called Mary Russell, so it's kind of set after all the Conan Doyle stories. Sherlock Holmes has kind of retired to the Sussex countryside and is investigating and experimenting with bees. And Mary Russell, who's this teenage girl, kind of meets him basically. She is like him, a kind of analytical genius, and they spark up a friendship, and she ends up getting involved in solving various cases with him. So this is a really enjoyable mystery. It's much like so if you think about the Conan Doyle Sherlock Holmes stories, they're basically, by and large, not all of them, but by and large short stories. And this almost, whilst this is a novel, it almost feels more like a a collection of short stories, in that there are several mysteries that they solve, kind of building up to the main one at the end. But as their kind of friendship develops and they get to know each other, they solve a number of kind of smaller mysteries, if you like, in the first half of the book before getting into the bigger one in the second half. So in some ways it feels like a short story collection. But yeah, really enjoying it. There's some nice humour in here, and it's got all the things I love about Sherlock Holmes. So it's got it's got Holmes like meeting someone and immediately telling them what their father did for a living and what they had for breakfast and things like that. It's got some good mysteries, some great characters. You've got all of the kind of peripheral characters of Sherlock Holmes, like Lestrade and Mrs. Hudson and Watson, of course, and Mycroft. So they all kind of crop up at various points. But it's also got something that I used to love from the Sherlock Holmes TV series when I was a kid, the Jeremy Brett TV series over here in the UK, which is Holmes disguising himself as various different people. So there's absolutely loads of that in this book, and I'm really, really enjoying that part of it. So yes, that is what I'm currently reading. In terms of channel stuff then, so a few things that I've put up in the last week, a few things clearly in the week ahead. So in the last week you've had my review of The Buffalo Hunter by Stephen Graham Jones, which I thought was an absolutely fantastic historical horror novel. You've had the My Perfect Shelf or Your Perfect Shelf challenge, where I talk about 10, it ended up being more than 10, but 10 books I would really love to own. You had a video where I talked about blurbs, so do we still need book blurbs? Do they still serve a purpose? And also a video where I talk about the fact I've moved from using my iPhone as my phone to using a black and white e-ink phone, and I've really enjoyed that transition. In the week ahead then, I haven't quite locked down my videos for the week ahead, but I think you are going to get a video talking about book snobs. You're going to get a Read What You Own checking, because I haven't done that for a while. So if you don't know, if you're new to the channel, the Read What You Own challenge is something I do every year, where I read 100 books I already own before I buy any new books. So I am almost 2/3 of the way through that. So I'm going to talk about that. And then you're going to get a review video, probably of Mockingbird by Walter Tevis, and then one other video, but I haven't decided quite what yet. So anyway, hope you have enjoyed that today. Let me know if you've read any of the books that I've talked about. Let me know what you've been reading this week. Really hope you've had as good a reading week as I have. And as always, thank you very much for watching. Hope you're safe and well out there. Hope you're reading good stuff, and I'll speak to you again very soon. Cheerio.